Welcome to the Communication Diva Podcast, episode 69. In this episode, Jen interviews Jesse Lemieux, permaculturist, environmentalist, educator, philosopher, and all-around interesting guy. The Communication Diva, saving the planet one sustainably designed garden at a time.
Hi everyone, this is Jen Swanson, and you are listening to the Communication Diva Podcast. And I am sitting in a kind of noisy coffee shop in sort of dull, non-sunny Surrey today, and I am with my guest, permaculture expert, Jesse Lemieux.
Hi everybody.
How are you doing today?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good. We'll have to sort of talk a little loud, I think, because of the sound in here. We've got great music going on in the background. I just want to tell you that I met Jesse through one of those online coupon things where he ended up coming over to our house and doing a garden consultation. And after you left, my husband and I looked at each other and said, wow, that was crazy. And we looked at each other and we thought, we just got taught for 2 hours, and it was absolutely amazing. And so this is when the wheels started turning, and I thought I needed to have you on the show.
That's some pretty good feedback.
It was a lot of fun. It was just like we didn't know what to expect. I'd never heard the word permaculture before in my life, and we were just really kind of blown away by all of it. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this, and then I'll ask you exactly to explain what permaculture is?
Yeah, so being a child of the 80s, so I was born in 1979, environmentalism was pretty much a standard part of the curriculum from kindergarten, like straight on through. So it was hammered into us as we kind of grew up through elementary school and high school and so on and so forth. And then obviously by the time I got to university, it was like the defining thing that we needed to be concerned about. So I went to university, I studied biology, and was tremendously disappointed with that experience by the end, because it just seemed like all anybody could ever do about it was catalog and complain, right? Yeah. And there was never any kind of meat to it. And when I finished with my degree in biology, it seemed like the only things that I was presented with in terms of job opportunities were, working for the government, right, sampling things, or staying in academia. And I wasn't really interested in either. So I went into agriculture, and I started working in conventional agriculture out in the Fraser Valley. And I kind of suspected that I would like it. I'm kind of a tactile person, a physical person. I've always been enjoyed doing manual labor, that kind of thing, and being really busy. I've been very athletic most of my life, and I got into this field of agriculture, and it really, really took root. So pardon the pun.
That was a good one.
Yeah, it really took root in that it really felt to me like it was a job that matched the pace of life, whereas it seemed like other jobs were kind of like this high-paced. I was a University of Victoria graduate. I was kind of more into the slower pace, kind of like cruisy way of doing things. So I really, really liked it, long story short. And while I was in agriculture, working in this first job on this farm out in Surrey, there was another fellow there. He was a student, and he just graduated with a degree in agroecology. And that the whole concept, I'd never heard it before. It really piqued my interest. It's like, what you're saying is, all this stuff I learned about biology and ecology can be applied to agricultural systems, and they can be more sustainable, more environmentally friendly, all of those buzzwords, right? And so that really intrigued me, and it really got me thinking, and I was like, 5 years goes by, I'm managing the crew, so I know how to run a farm now, and I'm kind of at the upper edge of where I can go at that one location. And so I start thinking about what I want to do. I'm thinking about maybe I'll go back to school, study engineering, so on and so forth. So I really start looking, right, for something else. And I was in Banyen Books in Vancouver, downtown Vancouver, and I was in the sustainable living section, like a green building, all kinds of weird, like fringy stuff.
That's
right?
such a great bookstore.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And I grabbed this stack of books and I sat down in the chair and I started looking through all these books, and I came to this one book and I read the introduction, and it was like lightning bolts. It was like, why on earth had I never ever heard of this before? Right? And I actually went and found my wife. She was in another section of the bookstore. She wasn't my wife then, she is now. And I held this book up in front of her, and she'll still tell you to this day, the look I had on my face, I was like, this is it, this is what I want to do. And it was a book called Introduction to Permaculture by Bill Mollison. And honestly, the first page I read it, and it was just like, what? Like, this makes absolute sense. This is all the things I've already learned, but just reformed and put into a functional approach as opposed to a observational approach, which is what science seems to be a lot of the time. It's just observation without much movement towards how do we apply this, especially in the fields of ecology and environmental, the environmental perspective. It's always this kind of, well, let's look and see how bad we're doing. There's always this kind of separation created between nature and people. This is the story that they use, is like these two things are separate, and it's like they're denying this basic fact that we eat, right, and defecate, right, and that by that very nature we are part of these things, and they kind of look at it and they say, well, the only way we can interact with quote unquote nature is negatively, and permaculture, what really grabbed hold of me is that it doesn't take that approach. It says, look, like, we're going to engage these systems, these living systems. We can do it in a productive way for natural systems and for us. So,
is that a North American thing? Do you think that separation?
I'd say, well, North American is kind of like the climax manifestation of the Western science space, and it's kind of, I think it's a bit adulterated, the science, that perspective. Obviously, there's a lot of examples from indigenous cultures or pre-industrial cultures around the world, or pre-civilized, dare I say, quote unquote, where there was definitely this recognition of a continuum or part of the whole, right? Definitely something that's strong within Native North American cultures. So it's definitely a perspective that is pretty Western in approach. So there's a little bit of that in there as well. Yeah. So that book really got me going, and that's the book I recommend to anybody if they want to get a taste of what permaculture is. That's really what it is. This is a design system that accounts for human needs, economically and social, but also throws in their environmental needs. And actually, we find that those things aren't actually at odds, right? Those two things are not mutually exclusive. They're actually, if we take that perspective, we can have a very rich and abundant environment that's clean, and rich and abundant people that are happy, healthy, clean, well-fed, and able to explore their creative potential, which, from my perspective, is one of the most important human traits, is to have the opportunity to explore our creative potential.
So you learned all of this, and then where did you go after you picked up that book and had that fantastic moment with your now wife?
Yeah, well, so this was the thing, is that up until that moment, I was a dogmatic bicycle commuter,
Yeah.
30 kilometers return trip to and from, to get to the farm, on busy roads out in the Fraser Valley with no shoulder. It was like war. It took every morning I get ready to go on my bike, and I have to get into this really aggressive kind of like, it's me versus the world kind of mindset, the lone cyclist out in the Fraser Valley.
There's a few of those around.
Yeah. And I see them. I saw one today, actually, when I was coming here on the side of the road, and I was just like, I remember that. I know what that's like. It's just like right there on Langley Bypass, head down, right, just pushing it. And I was absolutely committed to never getting in a plane. And at the back of that book, there's all kinds of information on permaculture design quote unquote, the movement of permaculture. I'm not so keen on the whole concept of permaculture, the movement, so much anymore, but definitely I was at that time. I'm more interested in permaculture, the design science these days. But I started reading, and here I was reading about its origins in Australia, and this guy named Bill Mollison who was teaching it in the course, and so on and so forth. And I started doing research about this course, and could I take it in North America? And it was at the end of the summer, so the North American teaching cycle had kind of already ended, because it's usually taught in the summertime. And I really wanted to like get busy now. And there was this course happening in the fall, our fall, their spring down in Australia. And here I was, this like raging environmentalist, finger wagging, angry at the world, university graduate environmentalist, considering getting in a plane to fly across the Pacific Ocean to take a course in sustainability. Right?
Carbon footprint, look out.
Yeah. Right? And I did, for a number of reasons, decide to go, and my wife couldn't afford to come with me, so I went on my own. I was there for 3 months. I took my first PDC, the Permaculture Design Certificate. It's the global standard 2-week course in permaculture design. The course has been constructed so that it produces more teachers and more designers. So it's like it's a self-replicating knowledge virus, right? Before, and that evolved in the early 80s, before the term viral became, common language. My teacher Geoff likes to say that people get a terminal permaculture infection. Some people take the course and that's it, and it changes their lives.
And it's a 2-week course.
It's a 2-week course.
Wow.
Yeah, and 72 hours. So it's about 2 university semesters worth. Yeah.
And this is what you teach now?
Yeah, this is what I teach now. I teach this. I've taught 20 of those courses since 2008 to nearly 300 students worldwide, places like Uganda, Australia, the Middle East. Actually, I never taught a full-length permaculture design course in the Middle East. We'll get to that story in a little bit. I taught a short course there. But yeah, so that's what I teach now. So it had its effect on me. It worked, right? And that's the way Mollison conceived of it, is that he didn't want to hold the information. The term permaculture, he could have trademarked that or copyrighted it. He didn't. He gave it to the Creative Commons. He wanted to see permaculture spread and replicate. He's really quite an amazing man, because he was about to get tenure as a university professor, and he walked away from the whole academic institution with the last third of his life, developed permaculture, and then in the years when everybody else is thinking about slowing down, he tells the story, he would arrive on the west coast of the United States with $200 in his pocket, teach his way across North America, and then fly to Africa with 15 grand, and then spend 6 months in Africa touring around, being involved in aid work, teaching permaculture there. And so he structured this curriculum. The mind of that man, it's kind of hard to conceive of sometimes. He made this great big fat textbook, 14 chapters, this huge thing. And he uses that. The intention was that North Americans, or people who had a Western education, who could speak English, would basically learn their PDCs, understand that book, and that they would be able to go into places where literacy rates were low and teach these concepts, the core concepts, to illiterate people, not only so that they could replicate what was being taught, but so that they could evolve and modify the basic approach to their circumstances.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah. And that's the way it's worked. It really has. Some people criticize permaculture for this thing and that thing and the other thing, but I think it's just sour grapes, because in reality, it's been this slow rising star since the early 80s, and movements and ideas come and go very quickly, but permaculture is just kind of like always been there, and it's been the basis for a lot of other things that have happened, like the transition movement. I don't know if you've ever heard that term before. Transitions Town was a movement that came out of the UK, and there was a bunch of books that were developed by this guy named Rob Hopkins. Well, his original training was in permaculture design, right? And so he took the social aspect of permaculture design, which is something that's taught in the curriculum, and elaborated on it into this thing called Transition Towns. There's a few other things that have kind of come out of the work of Mollison. So it's been pretty amazing thing to be part of.
It sounds like it's more of a calling than a job for you.
It certainly had that in the early days for sure for me. Yeah. So I did my first course with Geoff Lawton, who's a protege of Bill's, and then I'd only intended on taking that course. And I brought my bike with me, and I was going to bicycle tour in Australia for 3 months, because if I was going all the way down there, I might as well stay for 3 months, right? Well, my bike never left the box. I got a ride from one of my fellow classmates was on a road trip with his family, so they took me to Melbourne, and then I stayed with some other people that I had taken the course with in Melbourne for 2 weeks, and they were packing up and moving back to the family farm, like moving out of the city, the escape from the city, right? And I'm still in touch with them, and Nick is actually coming here. He's going to teach a course for us in June. So I built this connection, and for 3 months I just went from one place to the next, and then I wrapped the whole trip up with another permaculture design certificate taught by Bill Mollison and Geoff Lawton. So I got this really great immersion. There was no going back after that. So then I came home, and then by this time I had left the farm, and I was now working in environmental reclamation. Really, really good job with a company locally named Silvis. They work with biosolids and municipal waste sludges and things like that. Really, really good job. I learned a lot there, but it wasn't enough for me. This is where the calling part came in. On my exit interview, they asked me if what would have made me stay, and being young and idealistic, I said, well, different ethical structure.
Good for you.
but in hindsight, retrospectively, and a little bit more maturity, it was probably a little bit brash and radical of me, but I guess that's what you're supposed to do in your late 20s. In this day and age, 30's the new 20, right? So I was technically I was like 19 years old.
So you were being clear in your communication.
Yeah, I was being clear in my communication. I was honest. That was definitely following my heart, for sure. Not necessarily, maybe my brain too, or my brain was being led by my heart, or however it works. Anyway, I had gotten a job when I was there previously in Australia. There was a farm that asked me to come back. And I told them I'd come back if my partner could come back. Yeah. And so Tanya and I went back to Australia. We worked on a farm for 6 months there. We took all the money we earned there and used it all to fund 3.5 months worth of aid work in the Dead Sea Valley of Jordan, right on the Palestinian border. We're actually living in a little village that started as a Palestinian refugee camp in 1948. And most challenging 3.5 months of my entire life.
Life-changing, I'm sure.
Life-changing. Yeah, there was a lot of moments there that were just so mind-expanding. I remember, and it's kind of sad because it's faded. It's taken a while to fade, but some of it's faded. But I remember when I came home from there, or there was a moment when I was there, I was doing something. I had like 6 sacks of manure on my back or something on a stick, so I could get them to the garden so we could grow something. And I was in this, a call to prayer was going off, and I'm down in the Dead Sea Valley. Baptism site of Christ is like 5 kilometers away. Jericho, one of the oldest cities in the world, if not the oldest, is like, you see the lights of Jerusalem at night. There's gunfire regularly, and I was just standing there, and I remember in this dried out wadi, which is a dry stream bed, and it's basically the community dump, right? Because the rain comes and just washes all the garbage away, right? And that ends up down in the Dead Sea itself. I remember standing there just thinking, I can't isn't part of my vocabulary anymore. I remember that moment. I had it. That moment, I just stopped. I was just like, I can't say I can't ever again. Like, there's nothing I can't do. Oh, we have so much opportunity here. We have so much going for us here in Canada, right? We can take out a multitude of credit cards and max them out, and walk away from it, claiming bankruptcy. Like, we have all kinds of opportunity, and I just wasn't going to let those words be part of my, my vernacular any longer. It was that I remember that moment. There were other moments like that, but that was the really big one.
Sounds like a powerful turn of events for you in a way. Yeah. So that trip, we had planned to be there for 6 months, and we ran out of cash and will. Yeah.
It was just a game of will. It was just sheer will, and we had run out of both. And my wife is much more pragmatic than I am when it comes to these kinds of things. And I was quite content to just ride out the other 3 months watching bad Arabic television, hiding from the sun.
Yeah.
We did a lot of we were amateurs. We did a lot of things wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And really, in terms of what I do now with teaching and keeping this going, I think it's really my strongest point is my honesty about mistakes and my honesty about that situation, is that there's a lot that we did not get right there, but that's where the greatest learning can happen sometimes, especially if you're honest about it. And we went back to Australia, and we actually went to this fellow Nick who's coming, went to his farm, Nick and Kirsten at Milkwood Permaculture, and they took us in and they fed us and they took care of us and really supported us. And I mean, I don't claim to have seen the same kind of difficulties and challenges of somebody who's been in a war zone or somebody who's been subject to extreme physical abuse and violence and things like that. But I definitely, there was a point later on that year that I recognized that I actually probably did have a little bit of post-traumatic stress, because I came back home from that experience. I came back to Australia, and we were actually in a project that was set up by Geoff, and he was on Skype with me every day when I was there. It was really, really quite an opportunity to have his mentorship through that. And when we came back to Australia, you would think, I knew in my rational head the thing to do would be to go back and visit with Geoff and debrief, but I didn't. And he actually had to come to where I was in order to get a face-to-face conversation with me. And all I could do was avoid him. And I couldn't, and I knew, like, in my gut, I was just like, this isn't right, but I couldn't bring myself to go and spend time with Geoff and get the debrief.
But he came to you.
But he came and found me, yeah, just to make sure that I was okay. Because we've been living, he's married to a Jordanian woman, and we're living with his family there, and so we're really, really involved. And I guess there was just a part of me, and I guess this is the perfectionist in me, just like knowing all the things that I didn't get right and kind of going, oh, how could I, but I just, like, I knew that I couldn't have done it any other way. Like, it was hard.
Yeah.
Like, it was really tough. There was one point where there was a teacher who was supposed to teach in the West Bank, and she was going to do this, her name is Starhawk. She's a pretty relatively famous permaculture designer. She's written a bunch of books on, the woman's power and stuff like that, really activist. And she was going into Tel Aviv, and they told her to go home, like, you can't come in. And she was supposed to teach this course. So there's this course, and it was going to be canceled, and they needed an instructor. So the permaculture community really lights up when stuff like this happens. And so they got on the listservs, like, well, who's there? And I was there. I'd never taught anything in my life before. And here's Geoff, he's advocating for me. He's like, yeah, this guy, he can do it. And everybody else going, who is this guy, right? Like, he's nobody. And so I went in and I taught this course in the West Bank of Palestine. And this is the first time I taught anything. Here I am up in front of this class, teaching through an Arabic translator.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Teaching this thing that is, like, I'm really passionate about, and I really understand a lot of the elements because of my training in ecology and biology, but still, totally novice. And just sticking to the things that Geoff had taught me in my PDC, and just staying on point with that, and not being drawn into the political discussion and stuff that can happen there, and just sticking to the fundamentals of permaculture design. And it was going really well. It went incredibly well. But there was one day there where the entire village surrounded in razor wire and had a gate, and they put us under military curfew at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Oh.
Nobody's allowed outside. You have to stay in the buildings. So there I am teaching. This is an interesting exercise in communication. I remember talking with Geoff, like, how am I going to do this? I got to go teach this 5-day-long workshop, and it's just like, and they sent me their program, and they want me to teach about women's activism and stuff like that. It's just like, I don't know. It's just like, no, you're going in an emergency. You can teach whatever you want, right? Like, they're going to have to cancel, so don't worry about that. And it's just like, well, I'm going to be teaching you a translator. He's like, okay, well, this is what you do. Is when you're teaching, if you spit a sentence that's more than 7 words long, you've lost it.
Okay.
That was the parameter. So my very first teaching experience in the West Bank of Palestine, just like you're never going to forget this stuff,
No.
right?
No.
And so now I'm just like, okay, so I got to distill everything down into sentences that are no longer than 7 words. And he says, and then you stop, and then the translator does their bit. And he says, when I'm teaching you a translator, I just say my sentence, and then I just pick a spot on the wall and I stare at it, and I listen to the translator stops, and then I do the next sentence. And so that's what I did. I just followed that, and I just 7 words. I try to keep the sentence really short. And he's like, and then the other thing he says, if there's something that you really want them to know, say the sentence 3 times. Say it once, stop, translate, say it again, stop, translate, and say it a 3rd time. Stop, translate.
That's good information to know if I'm ever in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
I remember my first teaching experience, and I remember how challenging it was in English, never mind through a translator and in a different country.
Yeah, I pulled it off. I managed to pull it off. And I remember I'm a bit of a procrastinator, so I was setting my course notes for the day in the morning before class, and then staying up at night and hanging out with all these pals. It was a really emotionally charged experience from staying up late and having these long dinners. And by the time those 5 days were done, I was toast. And then I got back to Jordan, and I came down with hepatitis A, and I was laid up for the next month.
Yikes. So that was your first teaching experience, and when did you decide to teach again and here?
I didn't teach again until I got back. So that was in March of 2008, and then in September 2008 we came back home. We had $1,000 to our name, and we started our business. We ran our first introduction course, Intro to Permaculture, which we were advertising from Australia. I think I had 10 students. I think we broke even. And that was it. And I just kept on refining my curriculum, and then moving from intro courses to I eventually taught my first full-length permaculture design course that following spring in 2009. And I was committed, and I definitely was motivated by that calling thing you mentioned. So, and then there was that I can't moment. I was really imbibed at this point. I wasn't in a position to be saying I can't. It's just like, if I'm going to do this, I'm just going to do it.
Go for it.
So go for it, right?
Yeah.
And I just came home. It's just like, well, what if I go broke trying to do this? I don't have a family to take care of. Like, 27 years old. I got nothing to lose by trying this. And so we just started doing it. And at that time, in Greater Vancouver, there really wasn't too much activity with regards to permaculture. There was one listserv, a Yahoo group, and the last activity on that was 6 years previous for Vancouver.
So you had a good market there.
It was ripe. So there was a demand. Like, we got really lucky, like, from a business perspective, is that we came home and there was a demand that was being unmet. So first year we had it really easy. The second year there was some other people that stepped up, and then within 3 years' time it went from 1 course in Vancouver area to like 6 or 7.
So for somebody who is listening who doesn't know, permaculture in a simplified, quick version, what would you do if you came to somebody's place and wanted to tell them quickly about permaculture? I know you can't tell it all quickly, but what would a simple...
Well, so one thing that I've learned being a teacher and a facilitator, and advice, like, whenever somebody asks me about teaching, they want to teach permaculture, I said, well, like, the first thing that you need to do is have empathy. And I might not be using the right word there, but the way I describe that is there was one moment I remember when I was teaching, and I was talking, and I was pointing at my computer screen. I was like, this thing right here, right? And obviously the computer screen is facing me, and the projection is up behind me, right? So I got my back to the projection, I got my face to the class, and I'm pointing at my computer screen describing something. Right. And right then it clicked for me. It's just like, okay. And so from then on, I've really made an effort as an instructor to put myself in the shoes of the listener and really try and understand what they're seeing, their perspective, their understanding, where's their question coming from. So the first step in any consultation work I do, or any education or whatever, is I ask questions and listen. That's because permaculture has pretty much universal. The framework of permaculture is not just gardening; it's actually an approach and a way of doing things that uses the principles of ecological systems and how energy flows through ecological systems. Now, I'm not talking about like mystical energies. I'm talking about like actual resources, like from solar energy to water to nutrients. Those are all just different types of energy. So how those energies flow through and how the different elements in an ecosystem basically barter and trade and convey those energies around. So those principles can be applied to anything. And it's a really simple equation. It's just what goes out, right, must be replaced. Like there's no such thing as a free lunch. And ecosystems once something comes into an ecosystem, they try and get it to hold on to it, right, by bouncing it around from element to element. And so when I'm listening, I'm trying to understand where people are starting. Because if I know where people are starting, then I know where I need to start. Because having done this as much as I do and teaching this stuff professionally, I've got this massive, mental archive of all these different stories that I know have worked. And so then I start with stories, and then I look for physical cues on the face, right? And people's
body language.
Body language, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking for body language.
Yeah.
I can't tell you specifically what kind of body language I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But this is something that I've had an aptitude for, but I've always been somebody too that's always looking for a better way to do things. Doesn't matter what it is I'm doing.
Yeah.
If somebody shows me one way, I'll always experiment with different ways of doing things. And
Yeah.
that aptitude, that constantly questioning what I'm doing, lo and behold, it translates into communication as well.
That's right. Curiosity.
Yeah.
It's one of my key things.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stories that I've tried that didn't work that have been thrown in the wastebasket. And there's other stories that are like my go-tos.
Yeah.
And then it seems like there's new ones that kind of come and go. And I think that probably actually relates to what's happening currently for people, where their awareness or what's going on in the media, or so like that's how I get going, is I try and work out where people are at, what they're interested in, what kind of perk their curiosity in permaculture at first, and then build out from there. Some people only get so far, like you can only get so far with it. Some people done a lot of reading and you can really kind of elaborate on it.
Yeah.
But I think really not trying to have my agenda, right, and projecting my agenda for what I think permaculture is and what I think other people need it to be, and listening more to what people, their first interest is, and then helping them see the other avenues that it's actually possible or where it works.
So you're walking alongside with someone, and taking into account their needs without imposing your agenda upon them.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to describe it, for sure.
I'm just thinking, because a lot of people who are in business, and you're offering a service, whatever the service might be, you come over and well, this is what I would do, blah, 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 and do your thing. But that wasn't the experience we had. Like I said, we expected, I don't know what we expected, because we had no idea what permaculture was to begin with. But we expected somebody coming over and designing a pretty little garden for us, that we could, what we could put where and how it would all work. And like I said, we were completely blown away by all the information that you were sharing with us, and that it was a far broader thing and more involved thing than just, where to plant your carrots.
Yeah, well, really what I'm trying to do, I think, with everything that I do is empower people with a tool set. So I remember there was, when I first started my consultancy business, I bought this book that could essentially be titled Consultancy for Dummies, right? And it had this matrix on it. I forget what the parameters were, but, on the axes, but basically up in one corner of the matrix was where you basically, you, as a consultant, you basically give them a product, and that the client is then 100% reliant on you. Like anytime there's a problem, they call you in to fix you. They call you in to fix it. They call you in to fix it. They call you in to fix it. And then at the far end was 100% knowledge transfer, right? And so I kind of looked at that and said, oh, what I want, and this is working with what Bill Mollison's goals were and what Geoff Lawton's goals were. And the thing is these principles, once you get through, like one way people describe it, like with plants, like all they see is a green wall. Yeah. Like plant ID is always a big one with people. They always want to know what plant is what, and I'm very much just forget about plants on the wall. Like that's like deciding what color paint you're going to put in your house before you've even decided how many square feet you want.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like let's bring it back out and like look at like the overall process. And once people understand the basic elements of what we're working with and how it works, they will then take their own personal experiences and knowledge set and very quickly, if the teacher or the consultant has done a good job, very quickly start plugging their knowledge set into that framework and using it how they want to use it. As long as it's moving, we get them moving in the right first step, the following steps become easy. And so that's really the focus is. And I guess so, like if I'm really looking for, it's a bit unnerving, but I think a really successful consultation is one in which I never get called back.
You make yourself obsolete.
Yeah, I make myself obsolete.
Yeah.
Training more designers, and that's the desired effect for sure. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about this course, because it's a 2-week course, and you say you teach it all over the world, but is it a hands-on, face-to-face, or is it online, or how can people take this course?
Yeah, well, I mean, people do have a lot of options when it comes to the permaculture design certificate. There's people offering the full thing for free online. Now, there's paid online ones. You can do it face-to-face in a hands-on format. It's traditionally been taught as a 2-week course on location, usually on a farm or something like that, done intensively. There actually isn't much. One of the big things that I have trouble, this is maybe where I kind of impose my agenda a little bit when it comes to a course, because as a teacher I'm really quite dogmatic about the deliverable, like what I want to see. Like I got my curriculum, I want to stick to it, and the practical work of a permaculture design certificate is actually information analysis and actually doing on paper design work, like planning things out, planning and designing things. So there's we give people, like as their practical coursework, they're given a design project but when we teach it on Bowen Island, we don't do it as a 2-week intensive. We do it as a weekend course every second weekend. So we got one starting on July 13th this year, and students will be with us on Saturday, Sunday, and then they take a break and they come back the next Saturday and Sunday. So every 2 weeks, and that runs for a total of 7 weekends. So it starts in July and finishes in October. And in that format, we got a little bit more latitude. We got a little micro farm site on Bowen Island, so we take classroom stuff and we go out to where we call our living laboratory at that moment, where we do some experimentation with site survey, maybe a little bit construction technique, design, like field work, design work. We also have opportunity on Bowen Island, like with my clients, like we'll do an installation day. So that's where I show students. It's like, okay, well, this is design I've done for one of my clients. I've done this using all the techniques that I've been showing you. So this is what it looks like on paper, and it's just like, okay, this is how we move from paper onto the land. So they get that experience on Bowen Island. So we do a full day like that. Students in my PDC are given 2 design projects. So they do a personal one where they're kind of at liberty to, I try and encourage them to make it as realistic as possible, but if they just want to go wild and be creative, they get that opportunity. And then they wrap up with a group design project. And that's one where I give them, this is your site, these are your design parameters. And what we're doing now, because we're on Bowen Island, is we're building a relationship in the community. And so if I have clients on Bowen Island and they want a design, I say, well, how about we get my next class to do your design for you? And then you'll get 3 designs, and then I'll be able to give some input on that as well. So we're really trying
build connections.
Build connections, right, through that within the community, and and really kind of further the whole the discipline of permaculture by that. I hope is the goal, like on a local level. So those are the kinds of things that we end up doing. It's pretty classroom heavy, but I do my best to kind of. We got so many great opportunities on Bowen Island to like step out into the forest and talk about. We spend a day talking about forest, so we go out into the forest and say, okay, well, this is what it looks like in reality, and we talk about water. So this is where water is flowing across the land. Like, how do we deal with this from a design perspective? So I teach in that format, and then sometimes I do the intensive format as well. So in October, I'm teaching out in the Kootenays for an organization out there. They're a Buddhist meditation center, and so they've had me. This is the third year running now. We've done it out there. So we do that 2-week intensive format, and it's a real kind of immersive, event. And I think both formats have different opportunities. The 2-week course, I think, is a really good opportunity to really develop a level of technical competency in people. They get a 2-week break between classes to read, catch up on their reading in the textbook, reflect, work on their homework, right? Really let things sink in. They don't have to really mess up their regular life all that much. A 2-week course is like this full-on, like, it's got more of that higher calling, life-changing quality to it,
like
right?
Almost like a retreat.
Yeah. It's unavoidable. You're talking permaculture, like from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, sitting around, you're eating together, you're on site. It's really, it's really kind of that really immersive experience.
And you build community there too. If someone were to invite you to do this somewhere else, would you be able to run something in another location?
Like a 2-week course? Yeah. People, like right now, there's one person that I've been in communication with. We're trying to set up something in Guatemala. Another one in Tanzania. Somebody on Salt Spring Island. All this has to happen next year somewhere. There was one year where I did 8 of these 2-week courses between March and October, and I was on 3 different continents and 3 different provinces.
So much for not being on airplanes.
It was ridiculous, and we had a 1.5-year-old baby at the time. That was a busy summer. I've slowed down since then. The other thing too is that with the part-time course that we do on Bowen Island, and actually this is true, if somebody takes a course with me, like they go to this Clear Sky course in the Kootenays in October, and they're in Vancouver area, if they ever find themselves in Vancouver area when we're running a course on Bowen Island, we always hold 2 spaces in our course there for students to come back anytime they want, free of charge. So that one tuition is as good as any, as far as we're concerned, because we really like keeping with that knowledge transfer. We really don't want people to leave, with questions, feeling that it's not okay to come back and get a refresher if they need it. We still, it's with regards to permaculture, that's the way Bill Molson intended it, and we really try and hold true to that as much as we can.
It's about building relationship just as much as anything.
Yeah, it really is.
So if you wanted the listener to take one thing away about permaculture, what would it be?
Oh. Does it need to be like a short soundbite, or do you want...
Just what is the main thing that you are wanting to impart?
Yeah, okay. The main thing that I'm wanting to impart is that, from my perspective, I believe that there's a lot of nonsense and garbage when it comes to the environmental situation we're in and what we need to do to get out of it. And before I took my permaculture course, I bought into a lot of that trash. And it's through permaculture and through understanding that knowledge set and that way of looking at things that I come to see that the solutions are actually quite simple. In a lot of cases, they're not as dire as we're led to believe, and very achievable. And it doesn't have to cost us. Like I find a lot of green solutions are very expensive, and it just doesn't. I'm not convinced that it has to be that way. I think the expensive stuff is just Band-Aids, and then until we get to the heart of the overall pattern of doing things, right, that we're probably not going to find any like long-term lasting solutions. And that's what permaculture really does, is it gets to the heart of things, and I don't think it requires the massive compromises that we're often led to believe too when it comes to the environment. I think we can still enjoy a very high quality of life, and we can still pursue that creative fulfillment that personal fulfillment that I think most of us are looking for most of the time. Yeah.
Well, see, now I'm completely intrigued. If I wasn't still taking my master's degree, I'd be coming to Bowen Island, maybe in the future here. So where can people find you, and tell us the name of the company?
Yeah, my company's name is Pacific Permaculture. You can find us online at www.pacificpermaculture.ca. And we're on Bowen Island. We're up in Artisan Square. For anybody who knows where Bowen Island is, there's a great organic chocolate shop across the street. See, we have the 1, 2, 3 punch up in Bowen Island because our students, they can go across the chocolate shop, and actually every weekend we give our students a chocolate treat from the organics. I'm clever.
Yeah, you are.
I know.
Is bribery.
Yeah, it's total bribery. So we give chocolate to our students, and then they invariably go over and get more. Yeah. And they make gelato as well. Oh, nice. Like, so if it's hot and you're not feeling like chocolate or hot chocolate, you get gelato. It's really good. And then there's this great cafe eatery with like the best cafe view in the Lower Mainland. You can look out over Howe Sound, and they got really good food there. So yeah, come over to Bowen for a day trip. Come to Artisan Square, and we're up there at 582. You can knock on the door. We might be around.
There you go. Yeah, that's great. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Jesse, and thank you for teaching all of us a little bit more about permaculture.
Yeah, I've had a really good time too. Thank you, Jennifer.
So that was my conversation with Jesse Lemieux. And if you want to be in touch with Jesse, I've got all sorts of links on the website at communicationdiva.com. You can reach him by email, by telephone if you're in the area, or take a look at his website and you'll see all sorts of things that he is up to. Learn more about his classes that he's teaching and about his garden consultations as well. So those are all there for you, and we would love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you through SpeakPipe, through email, on the website, on Facebook, on Twitter, any way that you want to be in touch to get your feedback on this or any of the other Communication Diva episodes or topics that you have enjoyed or that you have a comment about. And also just a little wee update. I did have the blood test for the celiac and it was negative, but with all of the other things that are going on for me, the doctor says I'm definitely gluten intolerant. And so my fun adventures have begun. I have been gluten-free for 1 whole week now, and I'm finding it a real challenge. It is interesting to try and find food that tastes good, that is interesting, and it has some texture to it. And I love roast vegetables, and that's a great thing. And thanks to Jesse, I've now got a garden started. But if you have any ideas or any tips or any really good recipes, please send them my way because I will be looking for such things. And also, I've been dealing a little bit with what is apparently withdrawal symptoms from wheat, and I had no idea. But I did read that book, Wheat Belly, by the cardiologist, and was quite stunned to learn that withdrawal symptoms are not uncommon. And it's kind of scary to think that something that you are eating on a daily basis, on a regular basis, has that much of a profound effect on your neurology and your body. So interesting times. Anyway, I'm feeling hungry and a little cranky sometimes, and apparently that's all part of it. So there you go. My adventures in food. I am very happy that you spent this time with us. I look forward to connecting with you again. And until next time, this is Jen Swanson with Communication Diva. Keep the conversation going.